Hello everyone, thanks again for visiting my channel. I never really do this, but my name is Lana, and today I've kind of been thinking, alright, you haven't made a Van Talks video in a while, and the goal is to do one every week, so I was like, what am I going to talk about today? And there's been a lot going on. Got married yesterday, there was a lot that went into that, and we've kind of been moving on the road, trying to get into Montana, make our way through the Dakotas before it gets really cold and windy and snowy. And apparently some of the roads do get shut down and you cannot cross through no matter what unless it is an emergency. But I say all of that because today I'm switching up the angle. Normally I'm that way. I'm here. We're in the process of doing some laundry. I want to talk about something that I learned, and it is called mirror thinking. So that relates to our brains naturally mimicking the movement, tone, and essentially lifestyle of another being. And when reading about this, there were so many things that I learned from. Initially, what I thought of was a role model, right? Somebody that we emulate, we want to be like for several reasons, whether it's we admire their success in their lives, whether that's their careers, whether that's the assets that they own, their property, their journey, their growth as individuals, the way that they speak publicly in front of people. Or sometimes, you know, that person that has that keen ability to take something complex and really break it down simplistically for you, as if the goal were to explain it to their 5-year-old cousin, niece, or nephew, right? So there's role modeling. Then when speaking of mirror thinking, there was the idea of, you know how when we're interacting with an infant, right? And we make these funny faces at them sometimes, depending on your style and the way that you interact with children. I think I've learned recently that you don't want to do all the goo goo gaga, and the little babies to the babies. You kind of want to speak to them as if they were adults, because they're very, very in tune and intuitive, and they pick up quickly, and those are such developmental years for them. But so sometimes you think, okay, you make this face at a child or a baby and you're like, and then they start immediately, right? There's also, when thinking of that, the relationship between an adult and an infant or a newborn, mothers have this, we know they're very instinctual, right? And they have this bond with their child. But they say that mothers have this great ability to mirror their infant naturally. So if they hurt themselves and they feel pain, you may kind of like make this face or scrunch up your forehead. Then while I was reading in this book, there was also some discussion around empathy. Mirror neurons, I kind of want to start with this. They facilitate our learning by enabling us to imitate and understand the actions and behavior of those we observe. When we watch others engage in a task, areas of our brain are stimulated as though the task is being performed by us. Now that is key. Even though someone else is performing this task or action or behavior, areas in our brains are stimulated as though we were performing those acts. And then this is kind of what I get at. Research has shown that our brain has a specialized group of cells called mirror neurons, which are responsible for empathy and compassion. It's a little warm in here because it's nighttime and The van's closed. I'm gonna crack this. I think it's like Zevia, almost like stevia, but it's cream soda, 0 sugar. Yeah, they use stevia leaf extract as a sweetener, so it is pretty clean and natural. In this book, they spoke about empathy, and they related it to nurses and individuals in the health industry, particularly healthcare, and how oftentimes nurses who have been at it for a while or just new to it, whatever it may be, they love their jobs, they're good at them, and they feel as though they're making an impact in their careers, and sometimes they feel as though they experience disappointment because they couldn't help a patient, right? But oftentimes there's this similarity with across the board where nurses are burnt out and they leave shifts feeling exhausted or as though they have nothing left in the tank for their friends and family, and their self-care kind of lacks or falls off the edge. And in this book, when speaking about this concept called mirror thinking, you ever go to a doctor or you're in a hospital or in some kind of setting where there's a patient and a doctor, or you're receiving some kind of service, maybe it's therapy, and you feel as though you're just like another number or an object, and the experience isn't very personal. So in this book, they mention as a nurse, you want to have that kind of empathy. I believe it's cognitive empathy, where it's like, hey, you're sad and maybe you lost someone, and as your doctor or as your nurse, I feel that sadness, but I also have to understand and remember, although I feel this sadness, I cannot cry in front of the patient and their family. There has to be some level of maybe protection or distance or a boundary, simply because you cannot fully take that on constantly, right? But at the same time, you don't want to lack that ability to feel what the other person is feeling or anticipate how they may be feeling, right? So there was an example where this guy was having severe abdominal pain, and he was in another country where they didn't speak his language or he didn't speak theirs, and he went to a pharmacy and was really trying to explain his situation, use a translator on his phone, and was trying to work through the pain and the language barrier, and couldn't get any help there. He went back to his hotel, later was found unconscious, so he was rushed to the hospital, and he woke up with all of these doctors, nurses, and potentially even students receiving some kind of training around him, and he was shooken up, obviously. But then this woman came over and she grabbed his hand and she looked into his eyes and just sat there for a moment, and apparently the gentleman said that his pain was somewhat relieved. He could feel that his body had begun to relax, and it was simply just a matter of, she didn't say anything to him, still could not speak his language, and there was that barrier, but she was present and there was touch, and she kind of was just there for him. And that had a pretty profound impact for the man. Also, when thinking of mirror thinking, there is, sometimes you are sitting across from someone and they naturally start to copy your movements, right? That's natural. On the contrary, sometimes that can be done purposefully to make the other person feel more comfortable, or as though you are listening to them and connecting with them on that level. So mirror thinking can be used for good and bad. What I really found neat was when you think of celebrities, politicians, world class business leaders, athletes. Those are all individuals who have a lot of influence, right? And they have these large platforms where like mass media and just large populations of individuals are tuning into what they're doing. They're following what they're doing in their lives, and to a certain degree mimicking these people, whether it's they brought up the examples of the Kardashians, where they promote a lot of products as a form of advertisement, and they have some of their followers or fans believing that beauty looks a certain kind of way, can be achieved through certain kinds of measures, whether it's surgically or through cosmetics. But then they kind of pulled you back a bit in the book, and the author mentions, well, yes, maybe you admire the fashion of the Kardashians, or Kim Kardashian, to be exact. And then there's the thought of, I value the way that she can put an outfit together or put herself together, but let's kind of rewind back to what made her Kim Kardashian. And it was the reveal of that Ray J sex tape, and there's a lot of talk around that being done purposefully, and it wasn't leaked. It was intentionally done. So there's a lot of, hey, like, let's remember what we admire about people, yes, but let's also ask ourselves, do we look up to their life and how they achieved whatever success they may have? Because maybe you can slice and dice that, and there are certain aspects to the individual that you would like to emulate or mimic or incorporate into your life. But then there's the case of, I think it was Charles Barkley, an NBA all-star, stating, it is not my duty to, this isn't verbatim, but it is not my duty to raise your children. Just because I am an athlete and a basketball player does not mean that I should be given that responsibility. It isn't his responsibility to do that. And initially I kind of agreed with him, but then I thought about it. You have these young boys, sometimes, and girls, and just people, and sometimes even adults, that follow these all-stars and these basketball players and want to wear certain clothing, want to wear their jerseys, their Jordans, their sneakers, have the chain, the bling, and just like my nephew, for example, he will be 9. No, he is 9. He will be 10 in February. And his name is Orion, like the Orion constellation, and he loves basketball. He told me about Muggsy Bogues and how he's like the shortest NBA star to participate in the dunk contest. And he knows all these fun facts about these basketball players. And say if he is following them on social media or on YouTube, because that's where kids are these days, and I'll speak to that in a bit. And this basketball player, I don't know, Stephen Curry maybe, gets found drunk driving, right? Which is, it happens. Just because you're an athlete, you still are a human being and you make mistakes. Maybe it tries to get covered up, but my nephew will see that. So I think it's just, yeah, it's not a celebrity, politician, business leader, athlete's duty to tell kids how to live their lives and what not to do and what to do, and to essentially raise them. Their parents should do that, and their family and close friends. But they should be cognizant and aware of what they do on and off the court, in and out of the office. My SIM card was full, so I had to clear up some space on the GoPro in order to finish this. But yeah, just if you have a large platform and a lot of people looking at what you're doing, whether it's the way you dress, your clothing line, your sneakers, you're some kind of performer, or an athlete, I think there is some responsibility to protecting your image, just because so many people are watching. And you think about it, even when people aren't watching and you're a regular kind of person, it speaks to your character, whether you're that type of person that, walks and throws out that little piece of trash that you have in your car and you don't just throw it on the floor, or you even pick up something that's not yours and throw it out. Do you wash your hands when someone else isn't in the stall or bathroom with you? Or were you just gonna walk out the bathroom but you stopped at the sink because someone else was there? Things like that. And I'm guilty of it. Sometimes I feel like washing my hands, and sometimes I'm like, I don't know, like, no. And for some people, like, that's a deal breaker, and they always wash their hands, and if you don't, they're just like, you're nasty. But yeah, I think so. There was that also around role modeling and how we pick and choose role models, and the extent to which they affect us and influence our behavior and our decision-making lives. And then when we think of parenting, right, oftentimes our go-to for parenting is, well, how were we parented? What did our parents do with us? How did they raise us, right? And sure, when you're handed the baton and it's your turn to decide, you can pick and choose what you want to include and what you want to kind of leave in your childhood and not carry into your child's lives and their future. But the one thing is, my mom and dad did not have to consider the internet when raising me, and the amount of time that I spent on it, and just the role of technology in Alana's life, right? So when I decide to have children, sure, I know I don't want them to have a lot of screen time, which is why it took me so long to make this channel, and why I've never been too into social media just in general. But then there's, maybe they have it, but how do you monitor it, right? Is there a certain age that you allow for your child to have an Instagram? Because then they're going in there and they're following and they're scrolling, and that's all just molding them. And yeah, individuals outside of me and my husband and our close circle, as well as like school, people in the neighborhood, they're going to influence him and impact him. But sometimes it could just be that person that drives past our house, or another kid at the park, and you can't really put them in the bubble. But technology is a hard one. How do you go about that, right? And also, like, think of the movies that you watch, right? Like, you're sitting there and you're seeing how someone walks and talks and breathes, down to like those simple natural things. And whether you admire it or you don't, you will absorb that and you will mimic that behavior. So it's important to consider what you're absorbing. That's why they say be cautious about who you surround yourself with, right? The news that you're reading and how negative news sources and outlets can be, and how a lot of us like to tune into the drama and kind of get off on that as if it were a drug. But you want to be aware of those things. And I mean, hey, just thinking about the news now, I think of pornography, right? And how that can shake up what sex is like, and sometimes raise the bar or even have these false ideals. But yeah, just, I didn't really think about this too much. I kind of just read the book, and it made me like, it opened my eyes, but it also kind of scared me because I'm like, whoa, I didn't realize that I was so heavily influenced by things that were in and simultaneously out of my control, but most of the time unaware to me, and I just wasn't aware of it. But now I am, and I wanted to share that with you. So thank you for tuning in today, and for those of you still watching, I plan to continue posting these Van Talk videos, and currently they've been inspired by books that I've been reading and kind of centered around some of my passions, whether it's wellness, fitness, neuroscience, neuroplasticity, spirituality, and just overall how to make me a better individual functionally, physically, athletically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. But if you have any suggestions for me, please drop them below. Please like, comment, let me know if you didn't like this one. Please, please, please let me know what you think. And I plan on potentially shifting gears a little bit and talking more about, you know, things that I didn't think I needed for van life, that turned out to be pretty essential to my everyday life. Things that I've learned about myself and the world. So let me know what you're curious about hearing and learning and discussing, and we'll see where this goes.